people are just at a different level of communication. Like back in the day, I would say even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when you sent an email, you knew that people were checking their email pretty actively, looking at it. Well, the younger generation doesn't do that anymore.
Welcome to the High Voltage Business Builders, a show where we interview entrepreneurs growing and scaling their income through e-commerce and showing you the path to make your first or next million.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about whatever. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about whatever. I mean, I was thinking about what topic should we talk about. I know what the podcast is about, and I was like, man, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, we can talk about anything. I mean, we could talk if you want to talk hard hitting marketing. We can talk about the fact of how email is evolving and changing, and especially digital content creators are struggling through the changes and stuff like that. So there's things that we can talk about. That we can talk about the world and supply chain and how we're seeing the world kind of change and evolve as an entrepreneur. I mean, happy to talk about any of it.
Yes is the answer. Talk about all of it, Jimmy.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right.
All
So
right.
what do you want to
How
start
does
on?
this
Let's
all
start.
kick off?
We're kicked. You started
Oh,
us. That was the intro segment. We're on live. Sorry about that. I forgot to tell you that a minute ago. No, I was kidding. No, I was just like, he's going. Just hit record. Let's get this. This is good.
yeah.
No, I mean, let's talk about all those things because they are affecting the world of business and
Yep.
life and the ability to do components of that or deal with components or even be, in business looking forward as the CEOs of the ship to kind of be a visionary forward for where the things are moving and obviously to keep us out of the icebergs. Well, where are some of those? You talked about some. Let's start with some of the things we're challenging, it's challenging you right now, things you see challenging in the world and business and marketing, and then we'll dig into all that and pull some pros
Yeah.
out
I
towards the
mean,
end and make people feel good.
yeah. I mean, if I'm starting at the top level, obviously, we are all worried as entrepreneurs because we all sit in the future and live in the future. But at the same time, we also have to live in the 1 minute ahead of us, right? Like, I think one of the
Yeah.
biggest challenges of entrepreneurs and why we're crazy in our own way is that we live in this weird dynamic of like, we see 5 minutes ahead of us and then we see
Yep.
2 years ahead of us or 3 years. And I
Yes.
think for
Yes.
us, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about where is the world heading with this? Now, look, recession's recession. I don't even think that's as big of a deal. We needed a little bit of a correction almost, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, I'm not as worried about that as much, but I'm more worried about just where the world is heading. I mean, essentially, right? Like we still got war going on, more pending war, supply
Mhm.
chain issues. There's going to be famine issues because of lack of supplies. I'm not sure if you're experiencing it, but waiting 6 months, a year for things because things are just way behind and everything that we've gotten used to over the years of being able to have plentiful and bountiful resources and things are obviously being affected right now. And it's interesting because we see it at the business level as well, too. Like
Yeah.
when we're talking about business, the moment Ukraine war happened and all these people started putting sanctions on Russia and everything, well, we saw companies that we're servicing get hurt pretty quickly
Yeah.
because their business was affected, though it could have been just as simple as they were selling there, but they also have employees there. They also had product made there. They also had, they had different logistics that were happening because, well, it's a kind of a big country. So,
A big
we
country.
saw, yeah, and we saw these things happening pretty quickly. And I think that it's kind of stabilized a little bit as far as like watching the businesses kind of figure it out. But it's definitely kind of creating like a rolling pin effect across the world, essentially, especially the small businesses. Unfortunately, these times of the world are when you see small businesses get affected the most just because they were not the most stable to begin with in most cases. And,
Mm.
I think it's really interesting because we see both sides. We see e-commerce companies and then we also see like digital content creators, affiliate marketers. We've got a little variety of them, though we're not focused there. We still have him. We continue to service him. And those guys are really getting affected. And it's very clear and evident why. And, it starts with just changes. I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing that I would say is that the world is changing, especially when it comes to email and just communication and marketing and relationship building. And, the world people are changing ultimately, right? Like, as the younger generation gets older and their spending habits increase, like those people are making that effective change occur in the world and people are kind of reacting to it. So, yeah, there's a lot.
That's a lot. Well, no, and I don't disagree because, obviously have talked before and you and I have known each other for a while, but the end of this is that to deal with the inner complexities of how to balance what you're doing in business with world events that may or may not affect you, but you're trying to avoid those or trying to create opportunities in those as we build businesses and companies. And you do the same, of course, as we're talking here. we're trying to navigate that not just for ourselves and our families, but for the people around us,
Yep.
which gets to be a little bit more challenging, doesn't it?
Yep, absolutely. I think that it's just, learning, watching. I mean, the weirdest thing is, I'm sure you experienced this too. Like, we have friends, business friends that are just struggling or trying to figure it out and they're trying to adapt or not adapt, I guess.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these downturns are also when businesses fail too. I mean, we're going to see a lot of
No,
failure. I
no
remember the
doubt.
last time, right? I've lived through three
Yeah.
recessions myself now, right? 2000, 2008, now, and this one. And each time I saw people fall, struggle, change, and it's going to change the world. It always does. Every time it changes the world and changes something major in the movement of the way that we think about things. And I don't think this one's any different.
Well, it changes the word, right? Change, adaptability, other words I'll have to go back to the sources to look up. The differences in your ability to, find your relevance, change it, or adapt it to market conditions. That's where true entrepreneurials will see their way through this, just like they did in 2000, 2008, et cetera. I was involved in those too on different levels. I mean, the 99 hype of we're all gonna, all the computers in the world are gonna shut down. And I was a computer tech going out and trying to help them update software patches like extremely fast so the entire operations of these companies wouldn't shut down. And then it was a nothing burger. Like, I think we like to hype a lot in America, maybe in the culture of things that feel
Drama.
bad. And so we
It's
have social
drama,
media
man.
as a megaphone to turn it into something 10 times larger than it is. And I personally feel like that's some of the things that are happening right now, that there's a giant megaphone of conversation and topic that's creating fear. But we've seen a lot of fear created in the last 3 years, haven't we, my friend?
Oh, yeah.
And of levels of palpable nature across all kinds of things, and the obvious of healthcare, but that's also had rippling ramifications across industries, obviously, as it went out across shipping and commerce and all kinds of things that rippled out of it, right? But it turns out it's not showing itself to be quite as one thing as opposed to another. But I see that sort of thing happening now. I mean, you have a first level view, and for folks who are not aware, let's get into who you are just real quick, because your viewpoint that you're speaking from is relevant because you see it firsthand based in the business you're running, especially on the email side and communication side. So,
Yeah, I'll
um,
give you the high level 60-second blurb about myself and, get the audiences caught up in with. But yeah, I've been an entrepreneur for quite some time. Currently today, I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Sendlane. We're an email and SMS marketing automation platform for e-commerce. Now, before that, I think what's interesting is I also owned a retail store that became an e-commerce store. And then I had another business that was a content creator, affiliate marketing, a software company as well too. So I've seen it all a little bit. I mean, if I go all the way back 10 years ago, I was truly an affiliate marketer. That's what I would look at myself as. And I started evolving into more of a content creator as I realized nurturing and relationships were really important and also just felt more meaningful than being an affiliate marketer. And,
yeah,
I think I saw that evolution and Sendlane started out of need and necessity from those companies, ironically, because we couldn't find platforms that understood what we were doing as marketers and understanding that, you know, money just because you didn't have a brand didn't mean that you couldn't make money using an email list ultimately. So that's kind of how it
yeah.
all started for me. And, as we've adapted into the world, over the last couple of years, especially with Sendlane's continuous kind of movement into the world, has been really focusing on the e-commerce sector, just kind of using my background and what we learned and understood. And we see that as a very interesting world. And if we're talking about the business level things, it's a much more stable world for us as well, too. So, one of the things that
Yeah.
people always ask is why did we make a little pivot a couple of years ago and why are we focused more on e-commerce? And the reality is it's very simple and it's kind of hard hitting and it's kind of, but content affiliate marketers, content creators, they don't have their shit together a lot of times and they're really unpredictable when it comes to business.
Mm,
Up and down, close
mm,
tomorrow, open the next week. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
unfortunately, trying to build a business on top of that is really, really hard and it's unstable looking. So we made that conscious decision because we realized that that wouldn't be our go forward. I'm going to build $100 million company on people who can't, wake up tomorrow and decide they don't want to do their business anymore. It's very unstable
Yeah.
where you take a brand or a company like an e-commerce company or a retail D2C brand, they often have a vision and a future and a want and desire as well too. So kind of where Sendlane's at, and that's who I am as a person. So I come with a lot of background. Obviously, I've already been talking about email a little bit, but that's really where my expertise really lies. I also, do paid media, CRO, and other things as well. But email marketing is where I really live, breathe, and dream. And I love it. It's my favorite channel. I don't care what people say because it really, truly does drive revenue at the end of the day. And
It
it
really
keeps
does, man.
yeah,
There's a chart out earlier that said that in the communication types that send the most amount of conversions to Amazon, which is a channel we focus on. email was number one with a very distant other channel mechanisms of social media. So email is still the major component of buying, tribal building, communications, and relationship driven
Correct.
communications. It was one of the first, and it's sort of still one of the top. Yeah, there's a lot of fun with TikTok and all this other stuff that's going on out here. But to create true relationship driven communication, email and email sequences and communication driven, like newsletters and content newsletters that are focused on your product, benefit, or driven service, really make a huge difference. I have
Yeah.
like a 55-day sequence that's followed every lead that comes into my business and curates and communicates and explains and gives them plenty of time to trust and know and like what we're doing.
Yep.
And e-commerce is a huge component of that for the other side of the house. People are like, we can't do e-commerce on Amazon and do email. That's actually not true.
No.
And email in Amazon is a huge component of building up an asset base, obviously, to do that in ecom and Shopify. Of course, we know for the people who don't understand this, I will say something I'm sure you know very well. Ecom makes the profit in an e-commerce business, especially on Shopify. If you can do your paid acquisition and your traffic and lead gen on the front end, you still have to monetize them through email, right? And even SMS, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, some more too. In your e-commerce store, that's where your profit's at. That's your back end, isn't it?
Correct. That's exactly how money's made. I mean, that's it, right? Amazon's not making you the money per se. That's getting your brand out there. It's making you some money, but you don't have as much fees. And ultimately, your loyal customers will end up on your e-commerce site and order directly from you as well, too. So that's where you should
They'll
go.
give
And
you
then,
any opportunity to communicate,
yep,
right? And obviously, we know Amazon is not necessarily the partner, and I never tell anybody we're partnered with Amazon. Amazon's a system; it has its purpose. It sells to the customer. Can I give a customer, get a customer relationship, get emails from them voluntarily within the terms of service? Absolutely. But you need to build up those additional channels to create a holistic multi-channel marketing.
yep,
If you're really going to truly build a brand. And like you said, those who, my experience, and I'm just going to echo what you said a minute ago, are building e-commerce brands are typically those who have stable growth, consistent growth, long-term growth in their business.
yep.
Unlike my experience with affiliate marketing as well, which is when you get something running, it gets swept up underneath you and taken away all of a sudden. And now you're shifting gears to another offer. You're never actually owning, building, or creating any intrinsic value
No.
in your business or your marketing, right?
Yeah, you're a hero today and dead tomorrow, meaning like it's every day you are fighting the battle. You know what I mean? Like a good business is one that can run without you, right? I don't think in an affiliate marketing world, most often it's not like that, unfortunately. It's sad, but
No,
requires that heavy hand. And we see businesses all the time where the owner or founder will step away and say, "Oh, I've got a team to do it." Never works out. We've literally seen it over and over again, that playbook, right? So I
yeah.
think it's interesting, but yeah, I agree. I think that Amazon obviously is where all the buyers are. I buy from Amazon all the time and I find brands all the time through it because I don't jump on Amazon for anything more than to buy something. You don't go to browse, you go to buy.
I call it the add to cart of the world, right?
Oh
People
yeah,
need to
it's the
understand
it's
Amazon is just the add to cart.
yeah, it's the most buyer intent driven platform when you think about it more than
Yeah.
anything else. You don't search on
Yep.
there for no other reason. And, but you don't build relationships on that for either, right? And you've got to find that, right? There's all these large companies, retail is now shutting down and people are looking for their brands and trying to find that connection out there. And, again, get their email address, get in front of them, and well,
There are ways
get
to
them
do
to
that on the
follow you.
Amazon side. Yeah, absolutely. There's ways to do it on the Amazon in compliance. We can get between 20 to 40% of Amazon's customers to come into our
Huge.
ecosystem voluntarily within the terms of service
Yeah.
and start building that relationship and sending them back around to additional products. And Amazon's really great about sending additional products. But like you said, building that list is a huge component of opening the additional channels once you build a brand. So it's just scalability and growth is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And obviously that list is worth something. So if you want intrinsic value in the list, the business, in the future saleability of it, you need that email communications, direct mailing lists.
Absolutely.
So valuable. So compare me in your mind to email to SMS and where it's been, where it's at, and kind of what you see about the differences, pros and cons.
Yeah, we've been deep in the SMS world now and really just trying to learn and understand how people are doing. Well, here's what we've really come down to and what I've learned at two things. One, people are just at a different level of communication. Like back in the day, I would say even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when you sent an email, you knew that people were checking their email pretty actively, looking at it. Well, the younger generation doesn't do that anymore. They have thousands of unread emails. They use an email almost like what we use our post office box for, meaning like we use it off as like oh, we'll check that in 5 to 7 days. It's the same thing that's happening in email. And what SMS has enabled, and I think it's really interesting, is what SMS enabled two things. one, obviously people who prefer to get those communications on that channel. But two, I think that we've changed. SMS has helped, and why, even at Sendlane, why we merged them together and why we believe in the merge together is that it's become a channel that becomes a addition to your email. Ultimately, it becomes a conversational channel. It becomes a lot to a person. It becomes how they have the connection, right? And SMS is more intimate and they'll have that connection, but it also is a way to alert. I mean, we see brands that are doing just simple things, as simple as like, hey, I just sent an email about our latest thing, our latest sale that we're having, and that's all they're doing, right? And it might be just as simple as that, or as deep as making their sales and running their newsletters and all the things that they do. But even as simple as just getting people to remind and understand to look for that email is just as powerful. So that's the
Yeah.
positives of it. I think there's a lot of positives. Now, the negatives are very much the cost basis of it. It's not so cheap compared to email. And people are
Yeah.
always shocked by that. But that just means that your marketing needs to be tight. It just means
Tight.
that you've got to
That's
be
right.
optimized. It just means that you've got to know how to spend it. And just like paid media or spending advertising anywhere, man, like if you don't have everything else tight in your scenario, adding SMS is not going to help your business ultimately. It's going to hurt you because there's a heavy cost to it, substantial over what an email is. So we see both sides of it happening. I think the adoption is still going to take some time. It's going to be all about the people. And ultimately, the question is SMS right for your business is always a question that we get asked. And to
Mm.
me, it's all about understanding if your audience, right, cares,
With the
right? Who's your
channel. That's
buyer,
right.
right? If you got
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
65-year-old buyers and they're buying hearing aids from you, chances are they don't give a crap about your SMS.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean? And they barely
Know
check
your
your email
avatar,
anyways,
right?
but SMS,
Yeah.
and yeah, but if you got a really young, hot brand and you're selling clothing to 18-year-olds, well,
18
chances
to
are all they
35.
want is SMS from you. But they don't want SMS. They want to be able to converse and talk to you and have conversations. That's really all it is, in my opinion. It's the future support. I know Apple's already betting on it, right? Where
Yeah.
they're building these
Yeah.
Apple retail integrations. If you have the Apple card yourself, you can talk to them via text. It's like, to me, at least as someone who is busy and also enjoys technology, like that is so much better than dealing with customer
Mm.
service and calling on the phone, right?
Yeah, the customer experience, right?
Yeah.
Which gets into, I mean, you're touching on some very critical points here to draw out and make sure we're clear on. Don't just sell people. Communicate with them, find value, get them to trust, know, trust, and like you.
Yeah.
And then they will want to buy something from you because people want to buy, they don't want to be sold. And
Correct.
there's such a mistake I see with these marketers constantly as they're inboxing me. Number one, don't add my email to your list just because we had a conversation. That's one drives me insane, right? The other one is don't just blast, sales emails for 30 days straight and say, well, that's just my metric. No, that's,
Well, I
that,
like there's 2 types of ones, right? There's the ones that over email, and then there's the ones
yeah,
that under email because they don't wanna bother their people, right? And they'll send
right.
1 email a month, and it'll be just the sale. Again, no relationship building, just
Nope,
an
just
email
no.
sale, right? And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Well, why would I wanna buy from you?" Okay, and I think about this all the time. When I buy from a brand, a lot of times I buy not only for the need and necessity, the price does make a difference, but a lot of times it's because I like the brand, I like what it is. When you start doing what you just said and, you email every day or email once a month, all you're doing is buying people who are impulsive or want the discount, right? That's not the reason why people should be buying from you. If your people are buying from you because they got a discount or a reason is the price is so low right now, it's not really building a loyal customer, but it is building revenue. So positive, negative there. But yeah, man, like to touch on that, I think that is the core of why we're seeing a lot of the marketers out there struggle right now is they want to copy and paste. They don't want to do the hard work. They want to do the playbook they've been running for
right.
the last 5 years. Well, that playbook's changed, everyone. Like the playbook's
It's
no
desperate
longer.
greed, man.
Yeah.
It is, and if we go back to the recession conversation, the businesses that continued through, the ones that didn't shut down because of the liabilities that they created, were the ones that had established customer relationships that
Correct.
sustained through any kind of maybe client loss during that time frame. They didn't lose all their clients. They may have not lost their biggest client, which shut down their business to which degree, or their e-com business didn't get shut down because their product wasn't really needed in the marketplace, and they were able to sustain and go through that. So opportunities are there. Let's kind of close out this with some opportunities too.
Yeah.
What do you see on your perspective as opportunities right now that people should be considering as they're listening to
Yeah.
this?
The first thing I would say is that like the audience wants to create a connection with you. And I believe that one of the bigger opportunities out there are to start really understanding your data and the people on your list ultimately, either as simple as
Mhm.
asking them exactly what they want to learn from you or using the data that you have. I mean, if you're a store owner and you've got an e-commerce store, for example, you got 100 points of data on a person easily. And if you got that much data, you can start segmenting your audience down by something. Doesn't matter if it's by money, it's by visits, it's by, the type of products they've purchased, but really understanding your audience. I think for the first time, in my opinion, more and more people are understanding that data and in analytics and understanding how to utilize that is something that's becoming new to people. I always look at, like, for example, we're talking about e-commerce right now, and I look at e-commerce still so much in the infancy of where the world is right now, right? E-commerce in the
Mhm.
last
It
10
is.
years, it's pretty new, man. Like, it's a pretty new kind of cycle, and everyone's still trying to figure it out. You know what I'm
Amazon's literally just desktop, laptop, et cetera traffic just got surpassed by mobile,
Yeah.
right? I mean, things are just now taking adoption,
Yeah, it's
right?
still so small in infancy of the world, and I think that the second part to that, you've already kind of nailed it, is you got to start building relationships. It's no longer just about the sale, man. People want to have a connection. I always say, the Gen X, not Gen X, the millennials and the Gen Y and the younger group, they want to buy with you. They don't want to buy. They don't want to get sold to the same way that they had. They want to have a relationship. They want to feel like they're doing something. It's why mission-driven companies or purpose-driven companies are so powerful right now, is because they want to latch on and say, I'm not only spending $50 on this t-shirt, but I'm also building a tree or planting, getting some more water or something else. You know what I mean? Like, that mission driven focus is really important. So I think that's important. I also think that building a brand, I know that that's always something that marketers hate to hear, but building a brand's kind of important right now, because brand is building loyalty right now, and
It is.
branding and being able to be recognizable is how people remember you ultimately, and want to
Mm,
be remembered, and what's that called, and tell their friends about it as well too. So there's a
yeah,
lot of this
right.
stuff that all, and I mean, all comes into the one thing, is where, like, how do you make sure you effectively continue to grow through and thrive through this whole recession, essentially? Because I'm sure Neil, like, some of the greatest businesses in the world strive through recessions because they're doing the things right, while the other and your competition is falling apart because they refuse to change, pivot, or adapt. And that's why those companies success. Not because they're just the smartest people, they're well funded, or any of that stuff. It's really just the
Right.
smartest people who can pivot fast enough, adapt and change and grow out, while the other ones play my 5-year-old playbook and continue to fail. And then eventually, like, go get yourself a job at somewhere. And nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that,
dude.
but you're not an
So well
entrepreneur
said.
if you can't pivot enough. You know what I mean?
Nokia was an example of that. Did you see their board meeting just this last week?
No, I don't
Um,
even want to know. How bad was it?
oh boy, Nokia was they built the most indestructible, incredible phone ever, and it's an internet legend, right? And their board got up and basically they just got sold. And so in this press conference, the board literally broke down crying because they realized what they'd lost. I'm like, what is happening here? Like these people knew that they did not change, adapt, and pivot. And so Nokia will be most likely become the brand of our generation that no one ever knows about, with some of the best technology that was ever developed, the strongest, most resilient technology in the marketplace for
Yeah.
cell phones and media. And you're not going to hear about them in another 5 years. They'll
It's
be gone.
it's extremely sad. I mean, extremely sad,
Yeah.
because I mean, you and I both grew up on Nokia phones, and
Yep. That was my first phone.
yeah, we all had the first Nokia phone, and I think
Yep.
they paved the way. But they always say this is the same thing as, like, the whole, like, someone comes and sets the foundation, and then the startups or the new companies or the new innovation comes in and takes over once
Innovation.
this company changes it. Literally, what happens in the startup world? I mean, that's what we're doing, right? We're chasing the big guys, and we're chasing
What
the
we
ones.
figured out as being innovators,
Yeah, we're
not inventors.
displacing. Yeah, you're displacing your
I
innovation.
went down the invention path and it got terrible. I spent $100,000 on a patent with people that didn't end up working out. And whoa, that was a trip.
Oh, of
Once I
course.
figured out the difference between real innovation and invention, that's when so many things change. So
Yeah,
if you're an e-com or business and you have opportunities to innovate, like you said, pivot and change in the marketplace ahead of what is coming, which is, a change. Like you said, a recession is kind of a negative word. And even they
yeah.
locked the Wikipedia yesterday and won't let anybody change it after the final edit of, we're not in a recession was left on the Wikipedia page. Like these people are morons. So at the end of the day, it is we have a change coming, a correction, a market right size, and we know things have been inflated. We know America is way up on its debt, way up on its inflation, way up on a whole lot of things. And what we see as right sizing in America in this conversation, and I'm sure you agree with me, Jimmy, is very different than where the rest of the world is. Even our right size, even our 50% decline is 150% greater than most of the countries in the world.
Yeah.
So what we consider to be a down, a change, a turn, a timeline for things that should be shift and versus when we got in 1 week, we now have to wait 6 weeks for. It's like, oh my gosh, all hell breaks loose, right? But it's like, what are you talking about, man? That's kind of
You
that's
know,
almost normalized. We have been so abundant.
we're spoiled.
And I see, spoiled. And I see so many scarcity mindsets listening, coming on and emailing me at times with their scarcity and, this is bad and you're a scam and this is crap and all this other nonsense. And at the end of it, that scarcity does not see just how freaking abundant we actually are.
So, yeah, absolutely. And, we see that. And I was actually talking to someone yesterday. I was at a event yesterday. We were talking about it. And one of the things that I said I was really worried about the future was not the fact that all this recession, well, all this stuff, right? None of this, right? I'm actually worried because the people that we
Mhm.
have that represent the future of this world, man, they're not very strong, man. They're worried
No,
about the wrong things. They're
nope.
not driven. They're not hungry. They're not innovative. They're not going to go change the world because they want to do it. They're more worried about how many social media likes they're getting or how their friends are liking their stuff or,
Or
what
power
the trend
grabs,
is,
right? Grabbing control. Yes.
It's wild, right?
That's the most interesting thing. We're going to have to come back and unpack that. Would you come back for session 2 and let's keep
Yeah,
digging into
absolutely.
that?
We
'Cause
could
that's
talk
a
about
whole
that
nother.
all day because I see a
Oh,
total
let's do
different
that.
world versus what the hustle and that we had in our generation. We were hungry. We
Dude,
wanted to go
absolutely.
grow and be something. And unfortunately, not saying all of them. I'm not saying that I'm generalizing, but the majority of people in their younger generation right now, they're in it for just to survive and have memories. And unfortunately, that doesn't survive and
Mm.
have memories for the world. Unfortunately, it does not help the United States become something and
Yeah.
continue to become the greatest country in the world, right? So that's what I
Well
was
said.
telling someone. I was like, that's why we downfall eventually is not because of shortages or this and that, because we're very plentiful and bountiful. It's the fact that we don't have the people who want it anymore.
It's the weak mindsets. Yes, no
That's
doubt.
yeah.
Jim, thanks you so much for coming on, brother. Well, let's get to session 2 and we'll keep unpacking that.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to jump on and keep talking about that.
If you like this episode, please share it with people you think will enjoy it as well. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode of High Voltage Business Builders.